Hello, in today's video I'm going to show you how I use my magic sewing machine, also called my digital embroidery machine, to stitch out and do designs that I've made and I've sketched out, and then I've put them in software, and then I've got them onto my sewing machine. And even if it's not something you've thought to do yourself, I thought you might be quite interested because it's just a really interesting process. And these are what I've managed to make. So I've made some flower designs and made them onto these patches that can be put onto like a bag or a denim jacket or something like that. You might have seen me do some freehand machine embroidery. I did a video about that a while ago, and that's when you just use your regular sewing machine. You lower the feed dogs, and then you can move the fabric around, and you're kind of drawing with the needle. And that's one technique. But I'm also doing some digital embroidery with my magic sewing machine, because this is a computerized sewing machine. It has an embroidery arm that moves up and down, and it's programmed to move in a certain way, and it will produce all these sort of intricate designs. And it kind of looks like magic because I'm not actually operating it to sew it. You program it all, you press start, the needle goes down, and then the arm moves up and down. I'll show you it working. I mean, nobody's ever said to me, oh well, it's cheating because the sewing machine's doing it all. But I just wanted to, just in case anybody thinks like that, I wanted to show all the work that goes into it, and also how everything is a tool and you can have as much creativity in it as you like, as long as you go about doing it in certain ways. Any digital artwork that I do it on my iPad because I have an Apple Pencil. And this is the program I use mostly, and you can see some of these. So this is the work that I've been doing. Got my drawings of all my plants in here. And what's so clever about Procreate is that you have all these different brushes, so you can get different effects. You can choose all your colours, and then you can just draw. And it's very responsive, especially with this. This is, I don't think it's quite the latest. So I can show you, if I go to a different, I can go to, this one's called Ink Roll. Make it big so you can see it. And you can see that the brushes are amazing, and that you can design your own as well. But this all works with pixels. So if I went really close in on that, you can see it's just lots of little squares. And the problem with pixel-based art is that it doesn't scale, and it can sort of get distorted. If you're going between lots of different programs, it doesn't necessarily have enough. I'm not very technical, as you can tell. I think there's not enough information there to keep a design secure. So vectors are a way of, they work in a different way, and instead of just sort of colouring different squares and different shades, they work with mathematical formula. So everything is a point. And actually, I think the easiest way would be if I show you, because it's quite hard to explain without it. Anyway, I'll put in some footage now of me showing you. I decided, so this is the ranunculus, and I want to make a patch just using that flower head. And I did do some screen recording where I showed me doing the sketch. So at the moment, I did it with a sort of watercolour effect because that's what I wanted in my sketch. And then I saved that as a regular image, which, you know, just as a JPEG. And then I've discovered this new, I just sort of Googled whether there are any vector programs that would work with on the iPad with the Apple Pencil. And this was one that was recommended, and I tried it out and I really like it. It's called InkPad. I think I might still be on a free trial, but actually it's not very expensive. It's something like about £6 or £7 a year. So, you know, compared with a lot of programs you have to buy, that's not too bad at all. And these are all the sort of designs that I've done already. And again, I'm going to show you how, because I did a screen recording of me making this flower, and I'm going to show you and sort of talk you through how vectors work.
So I've already got the document set up in the size I want it, and I just need to import my picture, and that's going to be my bottom layer, and I'm reducing the opacity because I want to trace it, and this will make it easier to see the lines that I'm making. With vector graphics, you have two ways of drawing. You can do either strokes or fills, and strokes are equivalent to a pen or pencil line, and you just can set your colour and choose what thickness you want, and then you set that you don't want to have any fill, and I'll explain about the fill later. And then I'm going to select the brush tool on the left here, and I'm just going to use my pencil, my Apple pencil, to draw lines. But this time, every time I draw a line, I'm making a path. Although you can make continuous lines, because you can add on each time, every time you lift up your pencil, you're making an individual path, and I'll explain why that's relevant later. But at the moment, I'm just using my pen to trace round the flower shapes to make my outline. And then afterwards, if I want to refine the lines, I go to that tool top left, and you can see that I can now see the nodes, which are the little points where the lines sort of change direction. And you can manipulate these nodes and just to refine your line. And that sounds quite complicated, but actually, especially doing it like this with my pencil, it's really easy, and it's actually kind of quite a satisfying thing, because you can go in and refine every sort of little bit of it. And if you've got an area, and I can just use my fingers to sort of pinch in and pinch out to see further into the picture. And if I decide that I need some extra nodes, I can use the node tool, which is the third one down on the left, and that will help me make a sort of smaller change in direction. And the nodes themselves, it's all to do, I don't quite understand it, I must look it up really, it's all to do with Bezier curves, and you can sort of move the nodes all the way round. And as I say, it's actually quite a fun way of drawing. Having sort of been not really known what it was for years, I actually really like it. So I'm labeling that layer outline, just to sort of keep everything clear. And now I want to do the fill, and for this I'm obviously going to be using the fill tool. So again, I'm setting the color that I want, but I don't have to worry about stroke width, because this is going to make a solid shape. So I am using my Apple Pencil, though it's hard to see on the screen recording. But this time, when I make a line, I join it where I begun it, and that closes the path, and then the shape that I've made will get filled in with the colour that I've selected, as you can see here. And I just keep doing this until I sort of build up all of this layer. Then I can go in, I can expand it, and I can make the nodes visible and then refine it. It's quite useful to see, you often get these sort of little blobby bits, and then you can actually see that the line is crossed over. So I can just manipulate the node. I'm doing this with my pencil. Just you sort of grab either end of the node where you've got those handles, and then I can pull it out to give it the more sort of curved corner that it should have. If you want to make a hole in a solid shape, what I usually do is I make the first shape, and then I lower the opacity of the layer that I'm on so I can see where to make the inner line. And then once I've created that as well, I can just have to select both the lines of both shapes, and then I go to a command that will subtract the front shape, and hey presto, you've got a solid shape but with a hole in it. But I mean, I haven't been doing it very long, and I'm already finding it sort of quite easy to make simple shapes, which is kind of what the designs that I want to do anyway. And then when I'm happy with my design, I save it as something called an SVG, which stands for Scalable Vector Graphic. But what I can also do is airdrop it directly to my laptop, and the laptop is where I've got Inkscape and Inkstitch installed, because unfortunately I can't do that on the iPad. So I'm just, at the moment, I'm just opening a document, and I have it sort of set up in custom sizes for the different hoops that I use on my embroidery machine, and then I can just import it directly into that. And I realised that I forgot to make a circle for the background for my patch in the InkPad software. So now I'm just adding it in the Inkscape graphics. And with all these programs, you'll find that it comes with certain shapes already preloaded, and then you can manipulate them. I forgot to put my finger on the control button, so it came as an oval, but then I redid it as a circle, and you can make squares, and you can use these shapes and sort of overlap them all together to make other patterns and shapes with them. And because I want this circle just to be an outline, I'm doing it as a similar thing as with the other software. I'm letting it know that I want it to be a stroke, and you do this in a different way in Inkscape. You have to specify you want it as a dotted line rather than a solid line, and then it will know that you want a stroke. So I'm doing that, and then I'm just putting it in the right position so that it's at the back of my design. What's so clever with these vector graphics is that now I've got the image, but I've also got all the information that I use to create it. So do you remember I said how each sort of stroke of the pen was a path? Well, now I can see all those paths listed, and I can select each one, and I can carry on making changes in this program, but I just find it a little bit clunkier than using my Apple Pencil, because you have to do it either with the trackpad or with a mouse, and I just don't find it as easy to manipulate the images. But you could do it completely in Inkscape if you wanted to, but I just thought I'd share my method with you. Software, it's just so clever, and this is why vectors are such a good graphic for they're used for printing a lot, because they, as I say, you retain the information. And again, if I select the node tool, I can go in and see exactly the same nodes that I had on the other software, and I can manipulate them again. But as I say, I don't really like doing it in this software. But yes, it's just the perfect kind of graphic that can be used if you wanted to do a design for a notebook, but then you wanted to expand it to put it on a duvet cover. You could do it, because you're not going to lose any information as you make the graphic bigger. Now comes the fun part of turning all this information into stitch. This is autofill, and I tend to find it a bit dense, so I like to use one of the other fills. They're various different, it's just kind of the way it lays the stitches down, and I quite like this one, Contour, because it sort of does it, I think it looks more like natural growth. Because as you can see, it's sort of putting the stitches directionally sort of round the middle. And I also like to reduce the density a bit, because again, as I say, I don't like it sort of too stitchy. I think it looks a bit more naturalistic. And every time I make a change, you can see it's showing me what it would look like. I'm lucky because this is quite a simple image. You can run into problems if you're doing a more complicated image, Sometimes the params won't open. You see, I had a problem there because I was trying to show one of the other fills, the meander fill, and for some reason it didn't want to cooperate. Because, I mean, this software is completely free. It's what's called open source, so anybody can write code that adds to it. And because of that, it doesn't often doesn't run quite as smoothly as software, you know, that's a bit more sophisticated that you buy. But there are often ways that you can, there's usually a forum that you can, if you're having a specific problem, you can say what, you know, the error message is, and there'll usually be somebody who will make a suggestion of how you can make it better. But as I'm sticking to mostly quite simple shapes, I'm okay. And I've been playing with it for a few months now. Um, and yeah, so I'm just sort of trying out different things to sort of show you all the different options you have. Well, I'm just showing you a few of the options you have. And then when I find one that I'm happy, I just click the button at the bottom that says apply and quit, and then that should save it. I am just checking the jump stitches. I could I could spend longer putting things in an order where I don't have so many jump stitches, but as my sewing machine cuts them automatically anyway, most of them, sometimes the one or two I have to go in, because I, you know, for the sake of a demonstration, I don't want to sort of be spending hours do it. I just decided to leave it how it is. So now I'm going to go through the same process but with the outline stitches, and you can see it just shows you exactly the same way, but this time you get different dialogues, you get different boxes you can click. So you either go for running stitch or you can go for bean stitch, which is just where it sort of doubles back on itself. And again, I could spend longer. You can do an auto route and it gets rid of all the jump stitches, but I do find that then it goes over everything double because it has to sort of get round, and I don't like that effect so much. But you know, for some things I might do that, but for this I wanted to keep it. So if, because I'm trying to make it look sketchy, I just want it to be quite a thin line like the original sort of pencil line. Then the design is done, and then after that all I had to do was to save it onto a memory stick, and because that's how I transfer it to my embroidery machine. You do get some models that can do this wirelessly. I think they were a lot quite a bit more expensive, plus they had other features that I didn't think I would use, and it's not really that much of a bother just to use the memory stick. So I'm just going to show you how it all stitches out. So you have to mount the fabric with some sort of backing, either felt or a kind of interfacing that's called stabilizer. You get various different embroidery hoops. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and it's best to use the sort of smallest one that will fit your design. There has to be quite a wide margin sort of round your design for the needle to move around and to be able to get to it. So you always need a sort of larger piece of fabric than you think. I'm just sort of going fast forward through this because there are a few stages. You can change the size a little bit on screen, and you can move it around. So if you've got one corner of your fabric that hasn't been stitched on, you can do that. And I'm just setting it all up properly and threading the machine. One of the things about this machine that I absolutely love is that it has an automatic threader. So when, if your eyesight's getting a bit bad, it's really helpful to be able to do that. And even sort of stitching it out can be a little bit tricky. You sometimes have to change the lower thread halfway through. But and you can see there's one attempt there that I've had to abandon. I can't quite remember what went wrong with that one now. But now it's stitching out, and this is, I think I've speeded this up by 6, and it's going through and just to, this is the sort of magic part because it's just stitching it out without me actually having to operate the machine, and it's going in the order of those paths that you saw on that list. So as I was saying, if I had spent longer on moving those around, it might have done it in a slightly more logical order. It's mostly doing it okay, but I think in one or two places it kind of moves around a bit more, and it might use less thread, but you know, it's fine for something quite simple like this. And you can follow the progress of the embroidery just by looking at the screen. Most of these embroidery machines have some sort of screen with them, and you can see how it's working its way through the design there. And then I've also got the number of stitches, so you can see I find those timings can be a little bit optimistic.
So here is my finished patch. So if I can get it in focus. It wants to focus on my face, although I do that thing like I do on beauty adverts. And yeah, I think it's come out really, really well. As you might have seen me doing, all I've done is cut it out, and I've sort of just coloured in the edges because it's white felt. I kind of thought it detracted a little bit from it. So this was the first one I did, and I kind of thought maybe that was a little bit small after all. So I did this one in a sort of paler colour, and then I thought maybe that was too big. I think that one was 6 centimetres, that one was 7 centimetres. So then I split the difference and I did 6.5. And I think that's just perfect for the size. And I just started having fun choosing different fabrics. The fabric behind that was a sort of bluey one, had a slight bit of blue mottling in it, and it's really fun choosing the colours to go together. And then I did one onto some fabric that already had some of my text print on it. Almost, because it's red, it almost looks like a rose. I tried to mostly stick to colours that you would find in the ranunculus world, but then for my last one I did it in a variegated thread, so I think you'd be very lucky to find one that looked like this. But it's just been really fun trying out the same pattern. You know, that's what I was saying, it was quite, as you could see, it was quite a bit of work getting it up to scratch and also getting it to stitch out properly. But now I've got it, I can use it in lots of different ways, and I could sort of like combine several. I could put the stems in as well. I would just see what I decide to do with it. And also you saw that I had some teething problems, so if I used a thread that wasn't, I think the problem was using for one of them, I had to kind of abandon it halfway through. So this was the text on fabric that I was using as the background, and I actually really liked that colour, but it was quite a cheap thread. And whilst you can get away with that, even free machine embroidering, I think the digital embroidery actually puts quite a little bit of strain on because it's going so fast through the needle and through the mechanism all the time, that I got quite a few breakages, so I just sort of gave up, and that's when I swapped to doing that one instead. And I just wanted to say that I'm going to be doing some more experimenting, because I've got some water-soluble stabiliser. So it means that you stitch, instead of using fabric, you use the stabiliser, you do the stitching, and then you can dissolve the stabiliser completely away. Now I'm going to have to think very carefully about my design for that, because obviously if you're taking the backing away, it could, or unless you've sort of got everything crisscrossed properly, it could all just collapse. Plus you have to bear in mind what happens on the back, because with these I knew that I'd be sewing them on or ironing them on, so it didn't really matter what the back looked like. So I will be doing further experimenting, and I hope you'll join me to see the results. Thanks for watching.